guys, welcome back to another Sophisticated Man podcast with another guest, Mr. David from Hero Body Project. What's up, bro?
Hey, what's happening, brother? I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you coming back. The people watching this might not know, but we tried this the first time around, and the recording got messed up. It wouldn't let us save the file, so this is actually our second go around. But it is what it is. We got to deal with the technology problems sometimes. So for the people that maybe don't know you or don't really know much about what you have got going on social media, kind of briefly describe a little bit about what you do.
Man, in short, I'm a men's mentor coach. I work with guys to help them drop fat, add muscle, and live better. And a large component of that live better is the mindset strategies, the curriculum I have inside of my group. Really, man, just out here defending hope for men who have, in some way, shape, or form, lost their own. So definitely a passion project for sure.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly resonate with that. Men that have kind of lost their way or lost the fire. They call that, I think it's called thumos, right? That fire within. And I think a lot of men suffer from that nowadays. Is they don't have that drive. They don't have that that desire to level up. And I'm wondering, what do you think that stems from? Like, where do you think that starts in terms of not having that hope or not finding it?
Man, I think a lot of it is just my personal experience, as well as the clients I've working with now and the ones I had in the past. It always comes down to, something happens in life, and there's a difficulty, there's a challenge, and for whatever reason, that particular difficulty or challenge, oftentimes in their younger years, tends to hit them so dramatically that it just becomes difficult for them to get over. And of course, anybody that's gone to public school knows that it's very rare to learn about mindset strategies and learn about the actionable steps you can take for changing your mind and ultimately your physical environment. So guys just aren't taught, man. And so it's just like, this is what I'm supposed to get. This is how I'm going to live. And I guess this is it for the rest of my life. There's hope, there's happiness, and then something happens where they're struggling. And ultimately, it turns into a lot of the guys that I work with get their power from what they can do with their bodies, like most men, right? And so the guys that I work with, ultimately over time, they slip, they let life put them in a headlock, and it's 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and they're like, my body's shit. I don't know what the hell happened. Half my life is gone. I'm not super happy. And so ultimately, these guys kind of gravitate to the content that I put out. Because they hear and they see like, hey, there's hope that's happening, but also this guy is in his early 40s. He's very fit. He's living like he's got aspects to his life that I want to include in mine, right? And that's super common. And ultimately, it's, are these guys going to give themselves permission to kind of open that door and entertain possibility? And that alone, man, just the conversations I've had with guys where they defend their darkness, and it's we could go on a tangent with how difficult it is to acknowledge. Like, if you acknowledge possibility, on the same token, you got to acknowledge that you're the one that created your current circumstance, right? So without going down that rabbit hole, at least not yet. Most of the guys I work with, they've had some struggle. They identify that when their body is good, life is good. Let me get with this guy. And see if we can't turn some things around.
I'm glad you said that about kind of owning the dark side, because that is such a powerful just mindset to have. Because I don't think enough people really take full accountability of like, oh, well, I have vices. I'm addicted to, it could be porn, it could be addicted to food, it could be addicted to, pleasure, like being on your phone all the time, which is it's a real problem. But I think that the issue with guys is they don't admit that it is a problem, or they don't know that it's them that's causing the issue. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question from that is like, what is the solution? Like, where do you think guys can maybe drop the ego and learn, hey, I'm causing this, and like, what can I do to fix it?
I think a big part, man, is just the ownership aspect of it. This is something I guess again you guys won't see it because we couldn't.
Yeah.
I left the recording too early last time and screwed the pooch. But yeah, just that mode of getting into this extreme ownership. You actually mentioned the book by Jocko Willink and Leith Babin, Extreme Ownership, and man, so much when it comes to the function and mental model of owning what's simply not working in your life. So much of that stuff happens really naturally when you go through that frame of I'm just going to own my shit, all of it. And even some of the stuff I know I didn't actually do, but is in my purview, I'm taking it. I'm taking ownership of all of it because on the other side of that conversation is a lot of power. And that power stems from, if I created this, who's to say I can't make something different? Because you've got the proof. Like you have the proof. You've got the work. You've got the investment, whether it's time, financial, emotional, whatever it is. Like you put the time in to create this thing. And once guys reframe, they're like, well, I created this thing. It wasn't just, there's the power in acknowledging that we are where we are because of the myriad of decisions that we've made puts guys back in the driver's seat. It puts them in a position to say, fuck this. I'm moving forward, doing it my way. I don't care who says any different. Right. And in a really positive way, like we package that in a really positive way because there's vision creation. And there's a framework to how I move my guys forward. But I feel like oftentimes when people wonder, like, well, how do you get rid of the dysfunction? Why am I addicted to the pleasure? Do I express these things that don't work for me? I outwardly know they're not working for me. They're creating disruption in my life. How do I get rid of these patterns of destruction? That's almost like coming at it from a symptom perspective and saying, oh, well, I'm cold all the time. Let me just put a jacket on. It's a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid, right? Instead, you've got to know what's happening with your rest, with your recovery, understanding a little bit about what happens with your nutrition and that hormone cascade that happens every time we eat, and going, oh, well, I'm cold all the time because I'm underhydrated, which is a big one with your temperature regulation, internal temperature regulation, and I'm constantly stressed out. And so my immune system is taking unnecessary amounts of stress, amounts of hits, right? And that can physically make you cold. So just as an example, so kind of looking at it from just diving inward first, right? And so much of that stuff, man, without a guy even knowing how to fix shit, it's going to float to the surface. It's going to be in front of him. And 90% of the guys I work with don't need special tools. They don't need... Now, I have tools. There's certain things I teach to create a structure. But when it comes to the execution, the action that makes the most sense, guys don't need another self-help book. That guys don't need somebody to hold their hand. They're just like, it's in front of me. This is working. This isn't. This is why I'm doing it. Boom. It's a simple fix, right? But that doesn't happen unless the pain of the unknown is less than the pain of their current circumstance. Right?
That's funny that you just said that because I was just reading, I'm sure you're familiar with Alex Hormozy. I was reading his book, $100 million Offer.
Oh, the one
That's
he
exactly
just
what he said in the book. He said, well, I think this one was his first book. He has a second one now.
Oh, okay. Right.
This one, I think $100 million Leads is the second one, I think.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Okay.
So I'm just finishing not finishing, but I just started his first book, The $100 Million Offer. And he talks about that exact concept. Like when the pain of staying the same is larger than the pain of change, then you're going to make a difference in your life. So that's a hell of a motivator. And it's a wake up call, really, when you think about it. I think guys it's weird because there's a lot of pain I think that people experience, but it's not driving them to do something about it. I think sometimes they get lost in that negative loop, and sometimes they just kind of feed into it too much. So I guess, what do you think are some practical ways that a guy could use his pain or just kind of discover his pain? Some guys maybe not even aware what is painful, to start to use that to like move them in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's a big one, man, is discovering the pain, which sounds a little bit
Yeah.
silly to say because we're men. We know it fucking hurts.
Right.
We know it, but there's surface levels
Hmm.
to it, man. Like there's behaviors, there's things that we
Yeah.
do to mask. There are traumas that present that your subconscious allows because there's an underlying narrative there that says you deserve this or this is what makes sense for you. So yeah, discovering the pain is a big one, man. Like leaning in and
Mm.
sorting out what doesn't work for you, and it's I alluded to it earlier, the vision creation to have my guys go through. Just just saying and declaring what you want out of life is so difficult for guys. Like
Yeah.
how many of your clients have you talked to and you say, "Hey, what do you want for your uh, in your romantic life?" Well, I don't want this. I don't
Hmm.
want that. I don't like this. Like I'm not asking you that. What do you want?
Hmm.
Right? And
Yeah.
so just and but the undertone there is that when a guy says what he wants, there is instant accountability, right? Accountability to himself,
Mm.
especially if he's sharing it with a guy like you who coaches them. There's like toes are to the fire instantly, right? Even if he's not a client of yours, he knows the dynamic, right? Like, so there's a lot of things that happen that I think scare men away from, excuse me, that scare men away from the accountability aspect. But man, is it fucking powerful. And it's a
Hmm.
requisite. It's necessary for guys to lean into that uncomfortable because it's never as bad as you think it is. And we're just talking about saying a thing. We're not talking about actually taking
Hmm.
action. So to answer your question, that's the action. It's small. It feels
Yeah.
big in the grand scheme. It can seem inconsequential, but man, is it? It's like that. Who is it that says everything has a crack in it? That's how the light gets in. Right? Powerful,
Hmm.
powerful stuff, man.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get that crack and your eyes adjust to the light a little bit, then the curiosity and the exploration and possibility mindset very naturally peaks up. And it's all of a sudden, it's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, there is more than darkness. There's acknowledgement first, right? Or the truth. There's recognition. Then there's action. Then you're looking at the proof of your life and how you're perceiving it. So, I'm not answering your question. The practical things you can do are essentially like write down what you want. Doesn't matter how small it is. Like start with your shoes. If you're wearing shoes that you don't like, your ex-girlfriend made you buy, or you bought them because they were cheaper and the ones you wanted were only $12 more, but for some reason you couldn't justify the bump. Like look at the things that you want. Write down one thing that you want. Then you move into the behavior that got you the shoes you have versus the ones you want, and do a tolerations
Mm.
list. I will no longer tolerate X, Y, and Z. Or the opposite side of that, I require X, Y, and Z out of my romantic relationship, out of the way that I dress, out of my fitness journey, right? And so now you're setting boundaries. And when you set those boundaries, you start to discover the pain in a more specific way because maybe it was broad, you know it's happening in life, and you sometimes the guys will feel lost or they'll feel like they don't have direction or it's hopeless. Overwhelm is a big one, right? But once you start setting those boundaries, you start to conceptualize some of the minutia, some of the smaller pieces of where that pain is, and you can knock it out very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, you've got this battery of
Hmm.
proof that says, okay, I'm not necessarily that guy anymore, but maybe I'm this guy. And you're kind of like, you go to this sort of like observer chooser position where you're not necessarily bound by either because you've got the old narrative, all the old stuff, but now you've got new proof, new truth, and it's like you got to make a call, right? But it all
Mm.
comes in my mind. It all comes down to getting it out from between the ears and just write shit down what you actually want and what you will no longer tolerate. And it doesn't matter how broad it is to start or how very specific it is to start. But man, guys, if you're listening to this, I challenge you to write that stuff down. Give yourself an hour. And you might think for 40 minutes of that hour before you give yourself permission to write. But give yourself an hour and write down what you want and what you will not tolerate. and I watch as things change for you. Guarantee things are going to start changing
Mm.
for you.
Mm. It's a very powerful exercise right there. It's just writing it down and being clear with your vision and what you want. Because I think it's goes off what you mentioned a bit ago. You know, we spend a lot of time worrying about what we don't want, what we want to avoid, but not enough time spending thinking, what do I actually want? Like, what do I want to bring into my life? And
Mhm.
it's like that. It's like that saying with the purple elephant. Like you tell yourself, well, don't think of a purple elephant.
And then,
What is your natural inclination going to be? You think about a purple fucking elephant because that's your brain doesn't hear the word not. It doesn't care that you say
mhm.
I don't want this. It still just registers that thing. So instead of framing it that way, frame like, all right, well, instead of I don't want to be stuck on my phone all day, what do you want to do instead? Oh, I want to be, going on more walks, or I want to be meditating, or I want to work on a side business, or I want to read a book. Like that should be more of the input that you give yourself as opposed to, nah, I'm trying to avoid XYZ. But then
Yeah,
if you say that, you're only going to focus on X and Z because that's all you're telling yourself.
yeah, and then all of your efforts turn into strategies and investments and time equity into avoidance strategy, which puts
Yeah.
you in a very beta state, right? You're not attacking when you're
Mm-hmm.
avoiding. You're in a victim mentality when you're avoiding because you don't avoid things that give you power. You avoid things that take your
Mm.
power away, right? And so the switch is like, to put it in very common terms. I feel like in any sport this makes sense. You've heard the phrase, well, the best defense is a powerful offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, some shit's going to happen. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to adjust. But if you were on the offensive, if you were going forward, then the fear of being attacked becomes so much more minimized because you were giving attention to the things that are giving you power. You're giving your attention to the alpha you version of you. You're giving attention to the warrior inside, like all the things that, when we think about it and we spend time on it, actually raise our total testosterone count, make us want to go out and kill the bear, that make us want to have a desire to protect and provide and build the castle. Like all these things are very real if we are focusing on the things that we want and solving those higher level challenges in attack mode versus all the submissive behaviors that happen when you're operating in this victim mentality. And a lot of guys, man, I'm sure you've seen this as well. They just don't even realize the mental models that
Yeah.
they subscribe to and how they are so degradative. And it's like in every guy's defense, it's survival, right? A lot of what
Sure.
they're doing has gotten them to a certain point, and they're like, okay, it's kept me alive. But just being alive is so much different than feeling on fire, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like to your point, there's always a payoff for whatever you're doing. Like whatever vice you have, it's giving you something, and sometimes we're not aware of that. We're not fully conscious of what it is that we're getting out of it. But there's always something, and that's something I try to tell guys if they're having issues with like pornography or something like that. I tell them like, okay, what are your triggers? Like, what are you doing? What are you feeling when that's coming up for you? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't know. They're like, well, I just do it when I'm bored or like later at night or when I got nothing to do. I was like, well, when you have nothing to do, there you go. That's a trigger. Boredom causes you to want to, start watching that crap and to start doing that. So it's about kind of changing the behavior to the stimulus. So if you feel
Yeah.
bored, your reaction shouldn't be, all right, pull up my phone. It should be, all right, what's next? Do push-ups or maybe go meditate or read a book or do something else instead of the normal that your body and brain are used to.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And I feel like, guys, for those of you who are listening, this strategy applies to all things.
Yeah.
I had a client for a while who it was a little bit under the cuff. I could tell by the way he spoke about it, but it was a big issue for him, and it was a self-perception, a self-image issue. So I had one of my first clients when I first started doing the Acceleration Brotherhood. Back then, I just called it the Acceleration. but the same curriculum, and so much of it was he was cultured. One of my buddies in Austin, so there's a big Hispanic culture, and the type of Hispanic culture he grew up in was very much food and alcohol heavy, and he was a social drinker. He drank 4, 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and it wasn't a big deal. But he would also overindulge, right? And so one of the things we talked about when it first came up, I could see the nervousness in his face, the nonverbals, like he was turning away, he started to kind of slouch, he wasn't making eye contact, like it was a big deal for him. And so I was like, listen, man, like, okay, we know that this is something that you don't like with your current behavior pattern, right? But again, focusing on things, what you give attention to will grow. We just continue to work on his vision, continue to work on what he actually wanted. Guys, write it down, what he actually wanted. And eventually he ran into, and this of course is by design, right? He ran into some internal friction, and he's like, man, I love working out. I love the way you feel. I still like drinking a little bit, because for him, it wasn't a negative thing. Like there was a lot of positivity around the social aspect of drinking, which social was a big deal for him too. And so it might even be one of those things where a guy's like, it's not necessarily bad, and I'm not even sure I actually want to give it up, but how do I move forward when I see that this thing low key is like slowing me down, right? And so for him, for this past client, it was a matter of going, okay, well, what's more important to you? What do you like better? What is giving you more power? And it eventually got to a point where it's like, man, he started putting his own restrictions in our calls. He's like, man, I think I want to do like 2 weeks without drinking. And I was like, well, is that something that you feel is going to work for you? Like, what do you see? How do you see that benefiting you more? He goes, I think just, man, I really like getting up on Mondays. I like starting the week with like on the go and just like crushing it. He noticed that did a lot of positive things for him. And I said, okay, well, how would that change things for you if you didn't drink on a Sunday, for example? And he goes, I don't know. Let's give it a shot. I knew what was going to happen, but he had to inception himself. He had to bring himself to that point, right? And by the time we worked together for about a year, he got on a call with me. It was like the day after, and he got a little bit emotional. He's like, man, this is the first Monday after Super Bowl Sunday that I have not woken up so hungover I just wanted to die in 15 years. 15 years. Wow. And it was all because, like, what a big deal. But again, I mentioned earlier, like when you set these boundaries and you start to identify, to your point, identify the fear, then you very organically will begin to build these structures around what you want. And the fortification of those structures becomes so much more important and so much stronger than what you were doing, right? Than the hope, in this case, the hope of the future and what you can do becomes so much more critical than the fear of losing your current circumstance. So, yeah, it's a big deal, man. It's a big deal for him. And I like to tell that story because it's like, I just get lit up, man. I just get lit up talking about it.
That's awesome. That's a really powerful, like, coaching transformation. And, I'm glad you shared that, because that's something that I had a client who, not to the same degree, like he wasn't drinking heavily like that, and he was a little bit younger, so he would kind of do the same thing, go out socially, drink with his cousins, they would hang out, and every time they went out, he got into that, and then drinking led to staying up late on the weekends, which led to him smoking weed, and led to like not being on top of his task during the week. It's just, how it dominoes. And that was something we worked through as well, getting him to understand that, all right, what is causing all of this? What is the trigger? Well, hanging out with these cousins, because that's all they did. And I asked them, like, is that important, or is working on your business right now more important, or is your fitness more important than that? So he kind of had to make the tough decision, like, well, you're right. Like, I value my business more than I value hanging out with these cousins who, granted, they're good people, and he's still obviously their family, like he still loves them, but they weren't necessarily giving him any positive growth in his life in that area. So he had to make the decision, like, I just can't see them as much. I can't go out with them as much as I have been. And, after a few months, he started to get more productive. He would hang out with them maybe once a month, if that. Like, he really cut down the time. And I remember one time he told me that he went out with his cousins, and they completely like surprised him, and they took him out randomly one night. And he says, dude, he said, you'd be so fucking proud. He's like, I went out and I said, I just want water. I don't want any drinks, nothing. I'm just there to be social and have a good time. And I was like, that's growth, dude. Like, before you couldn't do that. Now it's normal for you to go to a bar and not drink and just have a good time without alcohol. And it's crazy what can happen, man, when you really just set the standard, like you said, in your life, and like, this is what I want to do, this is what I don't want to do, and just start embodying that and start living that life.
Yeah, and here's the interesting part, man. Tell me if this was the same for your client. This has happened. Well, hell, maybe the same for you. This happened with me. Every guy I've ever worked with, is when we get to that point where they start to set boundaries for themselves, almost instantly the fear of loss comes in, because they're like, what if I don't get to see my cousins anymore? What are they going to think? And sometimes those questions don't actually come up, but they feel it, right? So like, I don't like, it's the extraction of the old. It's part of initiation of death of the old to make way for the new. And more often than not, man, guys that I've worked with, they're like, yeah, some folks you're just going to lose. Like, they're not going to walk with you on that journey. They're not going to support you. Not necessarily that they're going to be hurtful to you, but they're just like, they're on their own path, sort of thing, right? But how many times it's like, I'll use my old client, for example. Actually, I'll use a different one, because he was coached about the same time as the previous story. But he went out, and it was like same deal. He was eating his own food. He was drinking his own stuff, not having whatever was at the event. And they're like, man, I feel like it's so cool. This is somebody talking to him. He's like, I feel like it's so cool that you're like, even out here, man, you're doing your own thing. And this coming from somebody that he was worried about losing touch with, right? And so when you stand up for yourself, people notice, and it is powerful. And it's really a pretty incredible filter for those who will always be your cheerleader, And it's just something that I feel like guys don't necessarily think of, because we're so worried about the loss. We're still stuck in that fear kind of subservient model, that when we step into ownership, it's a little bit new, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but then so quickly the positives of that newness start to rush in, and you're like, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, first of all. Second, I'm uncovering some new shit that's really cool, that's getting me lit up. And all of a sudden, I'm just not worried about the old stuff anymore.
Yeah, man, it's very powerful stuff, and I'm definitely going through that kind of transition now, just with like the old habits, old patterns that I'm trying to shed and develop new strategies, new habits. So it's very timely that we're talking about this. But even for people listening, like, there's so much that you can do with this, and you really can apply this to anything. Like you said, it's a fitness related thing, it's a habit related thing, it's a money related thing. I mean, all of it's really connected. And I think that when you identify, I forget what podcast I was listening to and who said, it might have been Hamza. He's like one of the bigger YouTubers. I think I heard it from him. He said that you have to start identifying with the behaviors, the thoughts, the actions of the person that you want to be, because the reason a lot of guys get stuck, and I definitely agree with him, like when guys get stuck and they want to make a change, whether it's habits or something they're trying to do in their life, they're still identifying with that old person. And say, well, I can't start a business because I'm still broke, or I have the XYZ. But like, what if you identified as a business owner already? How would you think? Like, how would you move? How would you go about your day? So I think a lot of it too is your identity shifting and being like, well, that's not how this ideal version of myself would think or behave. So I'm going to start acting like this. And then what's crazy is you get those results after you become that kind of person.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, you have to, and I hesitate often to say, hey, guys have to do this, but there's really no way around this.
You're right.
If you want to get different results, first, the requisite is you have to be that man first, and then the results will come.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Which is, it's logically, like on paper, it doesn't even make sense to say, well, I'm going to be this guy. How am I going to be this
Yeah.
guy without the thought, without the resources, without the mental model? But like you take on the education, but you can start,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where these simple modalities of meditation, of affirmations, which some of that stuff, man, I thought was so woo woo, but it is so technical and directly linked
It is.
to. I'm going to share something. This is a big one for what I teach my guys. So whoever is watching, listening, man, just please write this shit down because it will absolutely change the way you perceive your world indefinitely. Number one is, like you said, identifying the patterns. What did I used to do based on the results that I got, right? And it's the self-talk. Instead of saying, I am, fill in the blank, your current life circumstance or your current job position, you start saying, I am new life circumstance, new job position. If you're working a 9 to 5 and you hate it, start saying, I am business owner of Stamps R Us. I don't know, whatever it is you're hyped up about, right? Because the more you say it, the repetition of speak is undeniably powerful, right? Even say it, hear it, see it. So start writing it down. I am this guy, right? And you will actually start to see those parts with you because it's never a lie. It's never a lie. And we're talking about character traits, right? Not necessarily results. You can say, I am a millionaire. You've got to go deeper than that. You have to say, I earn X number of dollars a year because the work I do that builds this type of community. Like, it's got to be a core value sort of thing. So when you start to say, I am the type of man who defends hope for men who have lost theirs, I am a conduit to love and possibility. Those are like core value things, and you will show up in your world, every single domain like that eventually, despite what your history says, right? And so you've got to say it, hear it, see it. And once you start to do that into your world, things will start to change. You'll start to see things differently. You'll start to behave differently, to your point, in the way of your new self. The second part of this is like the secret, right? You can't just. The secret was awesome. The intention, putting it out, accountability, like statistically, it just works, right? Whether you're using meditation only, whether you're creating vision maps, or whether you're creating a vision board, whether it's affirmations or you're writing notes on your bathroom mirror, it doesn't matter. Whatever works for you, you've got to do something that simply puts what's in here out into your current reality. That's the initiation of change. Then the other part of it is the meditation. And here's the key. This is absolute game changer. When you begin to feel the feelings that will be real once you've achieved that new result, you're already in it. Why do we know that? Because internally, that reticular activating system, the stuff that's internal, there's a key brain center that doesn't recognize the difference between imagination and reality. So where are you going to spend the most time? I'm going to go ahead and continue spending time in imagination land, right? Now, how big and how grandiose that vision becomes is really up to me in the permissions I'll give myself. But if you can say it, hear it, see it, start writing that stuff down, putting out into the world, which is a little bit scary. We talked about the accountability, but then also giving yourself time in the quiet, in the silence, to feel what it will be like once you have achieved that life. Man, that is a recipe for living better. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, that's something I'm probably going to write down because that is such a powerful thing that you just described. And it sounds like if you just hear that for the first time and you maybe never really like understood these concepts, you might think, well, that's just like woo-woo stuff and manifestation. And like you said, it's like the book, The Secret. But there's so much power in that because you're literally becoming a new person. You're creating a new identity from you're grounding that into yourself. And when you start, and the biggest difference is like when you start behaving the way that you think and you start actually showing up like that in real life, people notice. I mean, it's not just something that's in your head anymore. Like people notice like, wow, you seem different. There's something different about you.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, Tino's changed. David's changed. And it starts to literally show up and people recognize that, which, hey, some people, like we mentioned, are going to not like it. And they're going to say, well, I liked you better before. I don't really like this new version of you. And then some people are going to love it and they're going to get inspired. You're going to maybe even influence them to level up something that they're doing. and say, yeah, man, he's on a different grind right now. Like I got to get at his level, which is the ideal situation. But yeah, I think it's so practical and it's so powerful, but it sounds like to the untrained eye or the untrained ear, it just sounds kind of like ethereal, but it's real.
Yeah, and that's a great word for it too, because ethereal is almost intangible. It's untouchable, right? We know it's out there,
Yeah.
but how do you
Yeah.
quantify it, right? And so, for
Mm-hmm.
those who are watching or listening, the power is in the repetition. There are certain
Facts.
non-conceptual, actually applicable things that we can do, and it's really just like, I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse, man, but the example of building muscle, all you got to do is do it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. Are you frequent enough? Are you using the correct amount of intensity? What's the time like? What's
Yep.
the like? There's some diagnostic things, right, that are very measurable, not dissimilar from what you and I are talking about. It's just time on task, and if you will simply commit to
Yep.
the time on task, your world will change internally first, right? That's a key. It'll internally change first,
Mm-hmm.
despite your fears or misconceptions about what awaits beyond the veil. You know what I mean? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yep.
and so it's like, man, it's just that permission to try a new thing. And I feel like the big hook here is, if I'm sharing this with a guy for the first time, a new client, I'm like, remember, yes, we're developing vision, but it's imagination land, right? We're just exploring. You're not actually tied to a result yet, right? Because then when you get
Mm-hmm.
tied to the result,
Right.
then a lot of shit can go wrong, especially early on, right? Before you have the reps.
Mm-hmm.
But the reps, man, just like bang them out daily. Daily, the reps will
Yep.
keep you moving in the right direction consistently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I think that's pretty much all it takes, man. And that's a great way to kind of wrap things up, honestly. I think there's like that's such a powerful concept. I don't want to like overload people with too much
Sure.
things to do, because that's like if you just follow that alone, I mean your life could literally change in like 3 months. So
Yeah.
that's a great place to start. So I would say, yeah, man, is there any like last things, closing statements you want to make, or,
Man,
let
I
people
would
know where
say,
to find you if they want to look
yeah,
into it?
100%. I want to piggyback on what you just said, and how quickly your life can
Yeah.
change. Every so often, I'll
Yeah.
do client interviews while they're in the middle of like 3 weeks in, 7 weeks in, whatever. And on average,
Mm-hmm.
simply applying these things, everybody likes a quick fix, right? Everybody wants a pill. Everybody wants to know, if I do this, I'm going to get some
Right.
immediate result, which is addicting in of itself, because then you get to do more, right? But on average, the 5 to
Mm-hmm.
7 week mark, when I'm doing these informational, not informational, these mid-session interviews, client interviews, guys are like 5, 7 weeks
Mm-hmm.
in, and they're like, I feel like a completely different person, like 180 degrees different.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because so much of that can change like that instantly. And
Very
I'll speak
quickly.
about
Yeah.
something I've got inside of my free coaching group on Facebook. I've had conversations with guys, and they're like, my whole mindset, the way I'm seeing things is different, and it's like literally 48 hours. If they do the work, 48
Mm-hmm.
hours, 2 days to do some of this stuff.
Yep.
A few hours if you really grind it. But I feel like it takes some sleep cycles
Mm-hmm.
to really kind of start to ingrain that stuff. But yeah, man, it can happen so much
Yep.
faster than people think. So
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, I'll share where you guys can find me. On Facebook at the Hero Body Project. Actually, my marketing team just had me open up an Instagram, a TikTok, and a YouTube channel. So it's all the Hero Body Project. But specifically on Facebook, if you're interested, if you're curious, if you just want to be a guy who's playing devil's advocate and you want to prove me wrong, I would challenge you to opt into. I'm putting it out there. Like, this is like the guy who's sitting at the table, and he says something polarizing, and the white sign says like, "Fight me, prove me wrong."
Yeah.
It's literally that. So I'm challenging you. If you're listening to this and you're a little bit triggered, good,
Mhm.
because I'm calling you out. And go to my Facebook group, Hero Body
Mhm.
Project. You can message me directly if you want. David Archer on Facebook. and I will add you into the group. And I've got a little journey. I've called it the 4 Doors Challenge. And it's essentially, like what you and I were talking about as far as the measurable work of ownership, where you're at, and then a little bit of vision creation. But I've got it staged in a fun kind of like, I don't know if you ever played like Splinter Cell or Metal Gear Solid, or we've watched any of the Bourne Identity movies. Like, I tried to package it in that kind of fun way where you're the operative. But essentially you're going through that process, and it's a microcosm. It's a mini path of that adventure, sort of like the initiation of the Heroes Challenge. So guys, if you're watching this and you want to give it a shot, man, go to the free Facebook group, Hero Body Challenge. Watch that first video, or if you're not sure, message me directly, whatever. I love it when guys go through this and they're skeptical, and by the end of like the second video, they're like, dude, like, what's next? What do I got to do? You know what I mean?
Yep.
But the key here is, like, you got to go all in. Like, you can't just consume. You have to actually want shit to change. So if you do that, man, if you do that, then it's I'm just waiting for it. I'm just waiting for that. I didn't know it could be like this type of comments. So.
Yep. Absolutely. And if you guys want to check all that out, obviously I'll leave the links down below. And like you said, man, if you guys want to just challenge us and challenge what we're saying, do it and prove us wrong. Tell us that what we're saying is wrong, and then just do it and notice the difference. So that's definitely my challenge to anybody watching or listening as well, is just to take on this information and apply it. And if it doesn't work, then you can sue us for everything we got and tell us that our coaching businesses are terrible. and then we failed as entrepreneurs. But give it a try for 30 days. 30 days is plenty of time. And dude, I promise you'll find a difference in that time frame.
I'm going to give a 48-hour challenge. A 48-hour challenge. And if guys don't come out of that 4 Doors Challenge thinking and seeing the world a little bit differently, and a slightly different trajectory with, and here's the key, this subtle energy that you actually want to take action, then I'll revamp my whole shit. Like, I almost want to be wrong a little bit, so that way I can refine it and tweak it and make it even better. But man, truth of the matter, man, it works. It simply works.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. I love the accountability on our end, because I mean, it's just kind of putting our money where our mouth is and being like, this is stuff. This stuff works. We live by it, and we're willing to die on that hill. So
100%, dude, 100%. So
yeah, man. Yeah, if you guys want to check out David's stuff and to get into that challenge, I'll leave the link to the Facebook group and his socials down below. You know where to find my stuff. All my links are down below. If you want to work with me, go through the programs that I offer as well. You know where to find that stuff. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and all that fun YouTube stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much all we got. And make sure you tune in next time for another podcast episode with maybe another guest. We'll see who shows up next time. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it, bro. Thanks for hopping on and doing one of these again.
Awesome, for sure, man. I'm always down.
Heck yeah. All right, guys, we're going to get going. Have a good one, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
All right, cheers.